Wait no longer, internet. Someone is finally posting a video about Rolex watches. At long last, this indie watchmaker is getting some attention. But seriously, despite my eclectic taste in watches, I still really enjoy this brand. And I'm not ashamed to say it, Rolex is one of my favorites. I'm basic and I embrace it. So of course I said yes when my buddy Kirk offered to lend me his new 2021 Explorer II. And of course, my first thought was to compare his Polar to my Polar in this video that nobody asked for and nobody needs. And yet, here we are. The Explorer II was the forgotten watch of the Rolex sports collection. To some degree, it still is overlooked, which is a weird thing to say about a watch with a waitlist. For years, buyers could pick from two multi-time zone Rolex watches, the legendary GMT Master and this other one. One watch was designed for commercial pilots, worn by actors, cosmonauts, and fictional colonels gone rogue. The other watch was designed for spelunking, which is putting your body in a hole in the ground. For me, the appeal of the Explorer II is partly the fact that it's less common and less celebrated than the GMT. But more importantly for me is that the watch has a version with a white dial, nicknamed the Polar. I prefer white dials. I find them more legible and I think they pair better with straps. I also think this steel bezel of the Explorer II results in a cleaner, simpler look than the GMT. You could say it's more boring. There's a fine line between simple and boring, and some of us are both. This is the Explorer II 16570, and this is the Explorer II 226570. This specific watch was made in 2008, and this one was made in 2021. The 16570 was produced for a pretty long time, from 1989 to 2011. This 226570 was announced this year in 2021 in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Explorer II. If I had to guess, I'd say this reference will probably run for 10 years, like the 216570 that immediately preceded it. Right away you can see the differences in these two Polars. The most striking thing to me is the difference in hands and markers. The newer watch has much beefier, bolder hands and markers. The GMT hand on the newer watch is fully orange, large, and has a pointer that extends beyond its lume-filled triangle. This is a direct reference to the first ever Explorer II, the 1655. This orange hand was missing on the Explorer II for decades and made a comeback in 2011. Compare the GMT hand to my 16570. I don't know why Rolex ever used the red hand with the black triangle. It's more subtle, maybe that's why. Or maybe they just thought it'd be economical to use the same hand as the GMT Master II at the time. After all, they were using the same movement. The orange on the newer watch doesn't stop at the GMT hand though. The title Explorer II is also in orange, where on the old watch it's just black. The 16570 uses green Luminova, and the 226570 uses Rolex's blue Chromolite lume. Just like the bulked up hands and markers, the newer Explorer II has thicker bezel numerals and bezel markers. In just about every way, it looks like the newer reference has been hitting the gym, or maybe the drive-thru.
Hey, I'm cultivating mass. Stop saying that.
And that's even true for the case and bracelet. 39mm by 12mm by 47mm long. 42mm by 12.5mm by 50mm long. 20mm end links with a 17mm clasp. 22mm end links with a 19mm clasp. Both watches feel and look great on my 7-inch wrist. I definitely prefer the weight of the older watch. It's lighter for two reasons. First is obviously the case is smaller, 39mm instead of 42. But also the bracelet links are hollow and the clasp is stamped from a tin can. Or that's the old joke at least. And it does feel thin and it does rattle, but I really like that. When Rolex changed to these modern fully solid bracelets, the watches got heavier, and good on Rolex for recognizing that and trying to keep things comfortable. They added the Easy Link extension to many of their sport bracelets. A tug near the clasp and the bracelet extends by about 5mm. I love it. I wish my older watch had it. It's not as needed on the older watch, but it sure would be nice on some hot summer days. The differences of these two watches extends to the insides too, despite the fact that they function identically. This 2008 Polar uses the 3186 movement, and this 2021 Polar uses the new 3285 movement. Both movements have a local jumping hour hand for setting the local time and setting the date. Both movements use a parachrome hairspring for anti-magnetism, and both movements meet Rolex's standard for superlative chronometers. But now, Rolex has timing standards even stricter, just plus or minus 2 seconds per day. And probably the biggest difference between the 3186 and the 3285 is the power reserve. The 3186 has a 50-hour power reserve, and the 3285 has a 70-hour power reserve. Rolex attributes half of that improvement to their new escapement system that they call Chronenergy. The new escape wheel has less mass, which means less inertia and less friction. The teeth of the escape wheel and the pallet stones have been redesigned to improve efficiency. And the system is now made from nickel phosphorus, which is impervious to magnetic interference. Innovations like this are partly why I think Rolex deserves all the attention it gets. They're a luxury brand where the quality might match the price, the list price at least. You can count on a Rolex to work well for years and even decades. I'm not sure the same is true for luxury cars, luxury appliances, or luxury clothes. I expect my Polar will outlast me, and this is one that I might actually keep that long. So you'd think that if I had the chance between owning these two, I would easily choose this older watch. But this newer Explorer II has given me something to think about. It's true I would choose the 16570 for myself, but there are aspects of the 226570 that I prefer. The movement, obviously. There's no question that the 3285 is objectively better. The bracelet and clasp, maybe. I think the Easy Link extension puts it over the edge for me. I love an on-the-fly bracelet adjustment. And I also thought that this older reference might look good with the definitive orange Explorer II GMT hand. But after seeing this mod, I changed my mind. This is just too much compared to the rest of the handset. But this with the orange arm, this could work. As for size, yeah, I prefer the older, smaller watch. But this 226570 is great. And the more I wear the new Polar, the more I see how different these watches are. They function the same and the name on the dial is the same, but they are starkly different watches. In fact, I think a person could happily own both and not feel like one is redundant. The 226570 looks so much larger to me. It doesn't wear a whole lot larger, it's not that heavy, and it is comfortable. But it has a visual weight, and I think a lot of that is due to the hands and markers, especially on a larger dial. In 2003, when Rolex introduced the 50th anniversary Submariner, they introduced what collectors referred to as maxi hands, a much wider minute hand and bigger markers. These on the Explorer II, these are super maxi. And when I look at the current lineup of steel Rolex watches, I don't see anything else like this Explorer II. By comparison, the other steel sport watches seem restrained and even staid. So the Explorer II is a bit of an outlier once again, an oddball, just like it's always been. I don't know if Rolex intended that or it's just a coincidence, but I like it. I like that for 50 years the Explorer II has been an unusual member of the lineup. The watch gets a lot more attention these days, but it still doesn't have the demand or the recognition of the Submariner, the Daytona, or the GMT. And thank f***. The Explorer II is now and has always been for people who want something that's out of the ordinary. And if you're going to buy a watch from the most recognizable watchmaker in the world, at least you can buy something that's unexpected, unconventional, and still a little underappreciated.